Good day, everyone. We are Group 2 and our company is NestNova Chickens. As risk management consultants, we are going to present about the risk areas we've identified for the procurement of live chickens from local farmers in Ontario, which will guide in drafting a contract between NestNova Chickens and the local farmers. So before we begin, we created a risk register here, developed for NestNova's poultry procurement operations. We identified 6 key risks under 3 main categories: the contractual, regulatory, and reputational. These include force majeure events, poorly defined termination clauses, improper application of veterinary drugs, poor chicken housing and environment, animal welfare noncompliance, and false or misleading labeling. We assessed each risk based on 2 dimensions: likelihood, on how probable the risk is to occur, and impact, on how severely it would affect the business if it did. So we've scored likelihood according to factors such as past occurrences or supplier practices, while impact scores consider financial loss, legal exposure, and brand damage. We've then scored them to have an overview on which risks should be most considered for NestNova's procurement contracts. Included in this risk register are also the mitigation strategies that will be explained by my teammates in detail later. So you can see here the total scores. And then we used the total scores in the risk register to create the risk map, visually showing which risks need to be prioritized. So risks in the red zone, which are force majeure events and animal welfare noncompliance, are both high likelihood and high impact, making them the most critical. So others fall into moderate zones but remain significant and require proactive management. So this framework allows NestNova to allocate resources effectively and develop clear mitigation strategies, which includes contract clauses, audits, certifications, and training programs to manage risks while protecting brand integrity and operational continuity.
Thank you, Shekinah. I'll be presenting 2 key contractual risks that NestNova Chickens must be prepared for when dealing with suppliers' agreements. The first risk is force majeure clause, which refers to unforeseen events beyond either party's control that prevent the fulfillment of contractual obligations. These can include natural disaster, avian disease outbreaks, or even sudden border closures, for example. Without a proper force majeure clause, these events could severely disrupt NestNova's supply chain, leaving the company unable to meet customer demands and with no legal ground to hold the supplier accountable. To mitigate this, NestNova must include a force majeure provision in every supplier contract. This clause should clearly define what types of events qualify, require both parties to notify each other promptly when disruptions occur, and outline shared responsibilities during the affected period. Additionally, the contract should include a cancellation clause that allows NestNova to terminate the agreement if the disruption lasts too long. This approach ensures the company can navigate disruptions with minimal legal and operational damage. The second major risk is poorly defined termination clause. Without clearly stated termination terms, NestNova may become locked into contracts with underperforming or non-compliant suppliers. This can lead to serious issues with product quality, regulatory compliance, and overall business efficiency. To prevent this, contracts should include a termination for cause clause. This would allow NestNova to exit the agreement if a supplier fails to meet critical standards, such as food safety, animal welfare, or delivery timelines. Additionally, a termination for convenience clause gives NestNova the flexibility to end the contract without needing a specific breach, so as long as reasonable notice is given. Lastly, it's important to include a cure period clause. This gives suppliers a chance to fix minor issues before termination occurs, which supports fair and constructive partnerships. Together, these measures help NestNova maintain control over its supplier relationships while staying legally protected and ethically fair. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Olufunmilayo and I'll be speaking to the regulatory risks that we have identified for our fictitious company NestNova Chickens. Now, 2 risks were identified under the regulatory risks. First, improper application of veterinary drugs, and secondly, poor housing and environment for chickens. Now, under the improper application of veterinary drugs, this has to do with inappropriate administration of drugs or use of antibiotics on chickens that are not approved by the Canadian Food Safety Regulations. Now, for NestNova to be able to mitigate this risk, number one, they should request for comprehensive medication records from their suppliers, and secondly, they should carry out random residue tests for drugs that have been administered to the chickens that they supplied. Now, this risk falls under the policy clause extra label drug use in food producing animals by persons other than licensed veterinarians is not recommended except when such use is conducted under the supervision of a veterinarian within the context of a valid veterinarian client patient relationship, and this has to do with only licensed individuals should administer drugs to animals or under the supervision of licensed individuals administering drugs to animals, including the chickens that are supplied to NestNova's chickens. Now, going to the poor housing and environment for chickens, the policy clause under the National Farm Animal Care Council says that poultry housing and its components must be designed, constructed, and regularly inspected and maintained in a manner that minimizes the potential for injury and allows for inspection of all birds. Where the suppliers of NestNovas do not comply with this requirement, then it poses the risk of having the birds being exposed to rodents, wild animals, and other animals that could introduce diseases to the flocks. Now, strategic plan to mitigate this risk include NestNova ensuring that their suppliers provide a ventilated space and with the right temperature for the chickens that they rear. And secondly, regular inspection of the facility should be carried out by NestNova chickens to ensure that the premises and equipment used are maintained and cleaned before they buy the chickens from them. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is Maha here, and I would be talking about the reputational risk of the company over here in NestNova. So, let's talk about the first one. Like, it's a general overview. What would the reputational risk cause to the company? It would cause damage to the company's public image due to the supplier actions. It would cause loss of consumer trust and investor confidence. And lastly, threat to long-term sustainability and the brand value. That is the main thing, the brand value. It would cause loss to that one as well. So I'm going to talk about the two risks that come under the reputational risk over here. So the first one is animal wealth animal welfare non-compliance risk. Suppliers may engage in unethical practices like overcrowding, poor transport, where chickens are congested, and it might lead to this one. Legal compliance may not meet public ethical standards. Risk of media exposure, public backlash, and consumer boycotts. So this are all come under animal rights, and this might arise if animals are not treated fairly, and there are ways to mitigate these risks, and three of those are provided over here, including launch animal welfare compliance program. Secondly, conduct random audits on supplier practices, and the lastly, include contractual penalties for the violations. There's a clause that I've included at the end, that is breach of animal welfare allows NestNova to terminate contract. So that was the first risk. For moving towards the second one, misleading product labeling. Supplier mislabels products as organic, free range without certification. So it's not right. Exposes NestNova to illegal liability and regularity fines, damages consumer trust, and violates transparency standards. There are three ways to mitigate this one as well. Firstly, require third-party certification for label claims. Secondly, set up traceability and verification systems. Train procurement staff to verify compliance. There's a clause that one is related to that. It is false claims result in legal liability and affect supplier relationship. So in short, risks are there, they exist, but there are ways that they can be mitigated, and companies are taking
measures to mitigate the risk. Lastly, I would like to discuss about what can be done to protect the company's reputation. Like as we all know, reputation is a strategic legal risk. Contracts must include ethical standards and enforcement clauses. Supplier practices directly impact NestNova's brand and liability. Ongoing oversight and certification are key risk to prevention. So that was all for my part. Now I would transition it to my next member. Thank you.
Hey guys, so that is all for our risk management plan for NestNova. Thank you so much for listening and watching.